You must have heard of terms like Mahalanobis model, Harrod-Domar model, LPG, Hindu rate of growth, and the list goes on. But do you actually understand what they mean, their significance, and the criticisms which emanated from these models? All these and a lot more happenings about Indian economy from 1947 to 2019 will be discussed by me in the next 20 minutes. So stay tuned and understand all these concepts with me in the next 20 minutes. Let's talk about the first and most important term, that is Hindu rate of growth. As you can see from the graph, from 1947 till 1991, India experienced an average rate of growth of only 3.5%. This average rate of growth of 3.5% is often termed as Hindu rate of growth. Therefore, Hindu rate of growth has nothing to do with the term Hinduism. It is directly connected with the low rate of growth which was experienced by India in the first half of its independence era. The major reasons and the problems associated with Hindu rate of growth will be discussed in the further slides. Now let us go back a little bit and talk about the era when the Britishers ruled India, commonly known as colonialism. The Britishers started coming to India in the era of 1700 and stayed here till 1947. The Britishers claim that they started the era of industrialization in India, but the stats say otherwise. What are the stats that can prove that England actually started the era of deindustrialization in India? A common measure is the share of world income that an economy has. In the year 1700, India had a share of 22.6% in the entire world income, which reduced to a mere 3.8% in the year 1952, which makes us come to the conclusion that the Britishers did deindustrialize India. What are the three major contributions of the Britishers in India which resulted into deindustrialization? Number one, abject poverty. Number two, illiteracy. And number three, drain of wealth. Drain of wealth theory was provided by Dadabhai Naoroji for the first time, who said that the Britishers looted India by earning some revenue, but at the same time by draining that wealth out of India towards their own country. At the time of independence, only 1/6 of India, that is 16% of India, was literate, and majority of the population was in the clutches of poverty. Coming back to the era after independence, in 1950, Planning Commission was set up. What was the main purpose of setting up Planning Commission? The main purpose was to create a well-defined timeline for the next 5 years, as well as a long-term vision document for 20 years in order to guide development in India. In the first 5-year plan that was created and approved in 1951, two things were carried out. Number one, Harrod-Domar model. You must have heard about Mahalanobis model, but very less number of us understand and know about Harrod-Domar model. It was this model which created the platform of first 5-year plan. According to Harrod-Domar model, economic growth can be carried out if we focus on two things. Number one, savings ratio, and number two, capital output ratio. According to this model, if a country has high savings, that means there is more money for investment in the economy, and that means more economic growth. At the same time, if the capital output ratio is high, that means for per unit of capital that the economy is putting into the system, the output that is being provided or enjoyed by the economy is very high. According to this model, because agriculture was the main contributor of India's GDP, so the focus naturally had to be on enhancing the contribution of agriculture and modernizing agriculture. How was it done? By modernizing irrigation methods in the economy. But this model and this idea was dumped in 1956, and we adopted the second model called as Mahalanobis model. In 1956, that is the second 5-year plan, the Mahalanobis model was adopted. It was also popularly called as the Industrial Policy Resolution, which became the Economic Constitution of India. So a question that can be asked is, which of the models is called as the Economic Constitution of India? What are the contributions of Harrod-Domar model? What are the contributions of Mahalanobis model? What is Hindu rate of growth? What are the negative contributions of Hindu rate of growth? All these are list of questions that can be asked from you in the examination. The Mahalanobis model went in a direction totally opposite to the Harrod-Domar model. The model said that if we want to achieve growth, we have to industrialize. And because India is a poor country, that means the private sector does not have money. So how does the country invest in industrialization? Well, through the government. And that was called as fiscal deficit. So the government started borrowing at a very high rate and investing that money in capitalized industry in order to create an inventory of heavy industries and capital goods. According to the Mahalanobis model, if the country invests in capital goods, that investment will automatically result into investment in consumer goods. Let us take an example to understand this. For example, the country starts by investing in bread making industry. What will happen? The country will start investing in industries which create bread, and that bread is going to be consumed by the economy, by the people in the economy like you and me. But instead, what if the country starts investing in industries which can create bread? So instead of creating an industry, creating a company which creates bread, you start investing in the technology of creation of bread. That will incentivize the private sector to set up companies to create bread industries or bread companies in the future, and that will automatically result in more growth in the economy. So Mahalanobis said, instead of investing in consumer good industries like bread, you invest in capital good industries like technology needed for bread. Although the Mahalanobis model contributed a lot towards growth of India, but there were some problems attached with this model. The first and major problem was that it used government funds in order to finance this. What this resulted in is heavy fiscal deficit for the government, heavy borrowings for the government. The second major bad contribution was license Raj. Mahalanobis model divided industries in India into three groups. The first group was basic and strategic importance industries. The second was industries which were to be partially owned by state, not so important, but at the same time they required heavy funds. Therefore, the private sector could not be expected to invest in them. And the third were the industries which were left to the private sector, and this included agriculture. Now, what were the implications of this? Number one, agriculture stopped growing. Number two, due to heavy dependence on licenses being provided to be a part of these three groups, resulted in red tapeism in the economy, and that slowed the growth of the economy. I hope you have now understood what Mahalanobis model was. As a part of this model, Jawaharlal Nehru gave the term of modern temples. What exactly is the meaning of modern temples? Let's understand very briefly. Jawaharlal Nehru said that instead of investing in temples or the conventional traditional temples that we have, we should invest in industries which can create growth and development for us and therefore can be termed as temples. Projects like hydroelectric dams, steel plants, IITs and atomic energy institutes as well as units were a part of modern temples, where I told you that the agriculture took a back seat under the Mahalanobis model. What happened in 1964 and how did Green Revolution start in India? After the death or demise of Jawaharlal Nehru in the year 1964, Lal Bahadur Shastri recreated the entire development model that we followed. He did three major things. Number one, he gave importance to the private enterprises and foreign investment, thereby opening up of Indian economy. He believed that Indian economy could not grow on its own and we should not be afraid of foreign investment and foreign contribution in Indian development. Secondly, he focused upon self-sufficiency in agriculture. Before 1964, we had been importing majority of our food needs. But after 1964, we started an era of green revolution and therefore embarked on a new journey on becoming self-sufficient in food security in India, which is a reality today, and the credit goes to Lal Bahadur Shastri. The third major contribution as a part of Lal Bahadur Shastri's philosophy was the White Revolution. He understood how important dairy industry was for the growth of India as well as for nutritional needs of India. And therefore, he embarked on a new journey of White Revolution, which was started by Verghese Kurian. Now, we have talked about the White Revolution very briefly, but we have not touched upon the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution was started by two major scientists in India, the Mexican Norman Borlaug and the Indian M.S. Swaminathan, who were given a push by Lal Bahadur Shastri. The focus of agriculture at that point of time was to be self-sufficient. But the focus today is on sustainability. And therefore, according to M.S. Swaminathan, we have to move from Green Revolution towards evergreen revolution, which means sustainability in agriculture. After the demise of Lal Bahadur Shastri, Indira Gandhi became the Prime Minister of India, and she took two major steps which were loved as well as hated by Indians. The first was bank nationalization and the second was rupee devaluation. Well, the purpose of rupee devaluation was to expand exports of India, because when the rupee is devaluated, exports become cheaper and imports become costlier. But that did not happen. Why? Because industrialization did not happen in India, specifically in consumer goods. Therefore, rupee devaluation resulted in inflation in India. The other step was bank nationalization. It was a good step, and the main purposes were to increase financial savings in India and to spread banking into rural areas. However, it came with a problem: crony capitalism. Crony capitalism means when the capitalist industries or the private sector colludes with the government and harms the economy. Bank nationalization was partially rolled back in 1991, and we will be talking about it, so keep watching the entire lesson. From 1965 to 1975, Indira Gandhi ruled as the Prime Minister of India. From 1975 to 1977, we experienced emergency in India. A new government in power in 1977. The Janata Party won the elections and came into power, and the first and most important step that they took, which also resulted in an economic shock for India, was demonetization 1.0. Under this step, 1,000, 5,000 and 10,000 rupee notes were demonetized or ruled out of the system in the name of corruption. At the same time, some bad steps were also taken, one of which was to ask the foreign investments to leave the country, because some heavy regulations were put on them. As a result, companies like IBM and Coca-Cola left the country. Steps like legalization of strikes and trade unions were taken in the name of welfare, but they hurt the economy really bad, and that resulted in the ousting of the Janata Party after another elections in the year 1980. Indira Gandhi came back to power in the year 1980, and she took a lot of steps in order to reform the economy. These steps were: number one, the license Raj was to be removed from the economy because corruption had reached very high levels. Number two, import duties were to be reduced so that foreign investors could come and invest in India. Number three, fiscal reforms were long due, and the government was under the pressure of large borrowings. Number four, price controls were to be removed so that competition could take place in the economy, which would result in economic growth. Let's assume that today the government says that bread can be sold only for rupees 20 and not higher than that. What will be the result? Majority of the companies would either go out of business or would stop making bread, because breads are priced at 30 to 50 rupees. Result, economic growth would be hurt. We often compare ourselves with China. But do you understand why Chinese economy is 4 times of Indian economy? Has it always been like this? Let us understand. In the year 1960, Chinese GDP was 128 billion US dollars. Indian GDP at that time was 148 billion dollars. That means higher than Chinese GDP. In the year 1978, Chinese GDP became marginally higher than Indian economy at 293.6 billion, and Indian GDP was at 293.2 billion US dollars. This gap has widened since then, and in the year 2018, we lie at 2.85 trillion US dollars, whereas Chinese GDP stands at 10.8 trillion US dollars. Let's now understand the reforms which started in India from Rajiv Gandhi's time in 1984. He made 3 major contributions in the reforms in Indian economy. Number 1, IT revolution. Number 2, telecom revolution. And number 3, the reduction in direct taxes. All this resulted in more growth as well as more income in the hands of the people, which resulted in more consumption, more savings as well as more investment. The Bhopal gas strategy struck us in 1984, and that made us realize the importance of regulation in India. The basic difference between regulation and control is that regulation focuses on promoting the industries, whereas control focuses on suppressing the industries. We changed our policy from control to regulation after 1991, when a lot of independent regulatory agencies like the SEBI, RBI, NABARD, IRDA, etc. were created or were promoted. What were the major reasons of India's crisis in 1991? One of the big reasons was the way government was spending money. Where was the government spending its money? Well, instead of spending in capital goods, which was embarked upon and focused upon by the Mahalanobis model, India was investing in revenue expenditures. For example, the cost of borrowings was so high that majority of our earnings were going into interest costs of those borrowings. We were investing a lot in defense because of our porous borders. Areas like pensions and subsidies, which included food, fertilizer, and fuel subsidies, were also taking a lot of these revenues. Finally, the government had created a set of PSUs under Mahalanobis model, but majority of these PSUs were facing losses because of red tapeism and high corruption. Instead of selling off these PSUs or disinvesting these PSUs, the government was carrying on these PSUs over its shoulders, and they were incurring losses. So what were the immediate reasons for the crisis in 1991? The major reason was high fuel costs for India. India was importing majority of its fuel needs from countries around the world. As the fuel prices hit the roof, Indian economy dived low. At the same time, as I said, we were investing our earnings in revenue expenditures rather than investing in capital expenditures. That meant no recurring incomes for India in the long run, and therefore the crisis. What happened to India during the BOP crisis of 1991? The forex reserves covered 19% of imports. The forex reserves could pay for only 3 weeks of imports, and the country had to pledge gold in order to get money from countries like UK, Japan, and international organizations like IMF. What are the positive results of the crisis? India took a lot of reforms after 1991, which were commonly called as LPG reforms or liberalization, privatization, and globalization reforms. Under these reforms, the license Raj was scrapped. Under these reforms, a lot of institutions of capital markets in India like SEBI, NSE, BSE were created or strengthened. Under these reforms, nationalization took a backseat and private banks were given licenses. And under these reforms, current account convertibility became a reality, which means you could export and import without any government intervention. What were the other major impacts of the crisis and the reforms? Number one, the PSUs started an era of disinvestment. Number two, the banks got privatized. Number three, the government started downsizing and it moved out from industries where it was not required. Number four, the license Raj took an end. Number five, the direct taxes reduced and that increased economic growth as well as activity in the economy. Number six, capital markets underwent a lot of reforms. And number seven, independent institutions were created which resulted in less corruption and more efficiency in the economy. What are the major institutional and structural reforms which India is still undergoing? GST, IBC, Niti Aayog. These are the three main contributions of the Modi government from 2014 to 2019. Under GST, the indirect tax structure of India has completely been overhauled. Under IBC, banks' finances have been given more importance. And under Niti Aayog, ease of doing business is taking the front seat. What is the purpose of all these reforms? The purpose is to kickstart the economy so that the vision of less government, more governance can become a reality. This was all about Indian economy at a glance. I hope now you understand the evolution of Indian economy from 1947 to 2019 in a better manner. If you learned something new today, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends so that everybody is more knowledgeable after this small lesson.